She had spent the whole morning thinking about this day, about the moment she would finally say yes. The sunlight poured through the windows, soft and warm, spilling over the floor in long streaks. She adjusted the hem of her dress and smoothed her hair nervously, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. Today felt heavy with promise and hope, like the air itself was holding its breath. Her friends had been whispering all week about how perfect this would be, how he had waited patiently and how she had finally agreed. She could almost hear the soft laughter of their anticipation, the secret smiles that passed between them when they thought she wasn't looking. She wanted to believe it would be simple, that the joy she felt in her heart would be enough to carry her through the day. The hall was bright, decorated with flowers in gentle shades, with candles standing tall and flickering as if they had secrets of their own. Music played softly, something delicate and familiar, filling the spaces between the excited murmurs. She could hear the shuffle of guests, the gentle clink of glasses, and every sound made her heart beat a little faster. She turned toward the entrance, expecting him, imagining his smile and the way his eyes always seemed to catch her before anyone else did. She imagined the words he would say, the quiet strength in his voice, and she imagined herself nodding and smiling without hesitation. Her hand went to her chest, feeling the rapid thump of her heart, and she felt ready. Then the door opened, and the moment froze around her. A man stepped in, someone she hadn't expected, someone she had hoped she would never see here. He moved through the crowd as if he belonged, his presence pulling every glance toward him. She felt her stomach twist, the warmth leaving her body in an instant. Her hand trembled, gripping the edge of a chair as if it could anchor her to reality. It was him, the one she had tried to forget, the one whose shadow had followed her through years she had hoped were already behind her. The air seemed heavier, every smile around her feeling distant, every laugh like it belonged to another world. She could hear her own heartbeat, sharp and uneven, and it screamed at her in a way she hadn't known it could. She had almost said yes, almost stepped forward into the life she had imagined. But now her mind reeled with memories, with moments she had buried deep, with promises broken and words left unspoken. Every step he took seemed to pull the floor from under her, every glance from him a silent reminder of everything she thought she had left behind. Her friends' whispers faded into a murmur she couldn't catch. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the words refused her. Her body felt caught between two worlds, between the life she had planned and the memories that had returned to claim her. And in that instant, she realized that nothing would ever be simple again. The room was alive, full of expectation and hope, but for her it had turned into a labyrinth of doubt and emotion she wasn't sure she could navigate. Her eyes met his for a fleeting moment, and everything she had believed in, everything she had wanted to leave behind, came rushing back in an unstoppable tide. And in that frozen, overwhelming moment, she understood that today would not unfold the way she had imagined. Her legs felt heavy, like they weren't her own. Every step toward the crowd seemed to stretch on forever, each movement slow and deliberate, and yet her mind raced faster than her body could keep up with. She tried to focus on the music, the soft string melodies that floated through the hall, but even that felt distant, like she was underwater, hearing everything muffled and far away. She could feel the heat of the room against her skin, the mix of perfume, flowers, and the faint smell of polished wood that clung to the hall. Normally, these little details would have comforted her, made her feel grounded, but today they only reminded her of how surreal everything had become. Her hands shook slightly as she clutched the edge of the chair again, and she knew if anyone looked closely, they would see the fear, the conflict that pulled at her from the inside. Her mind replayed moments she had hoped were long gone, small flashes of laughter and whispered words, of late-night talks and shared dreams. She remembered the way he had always seemed to read her, to understand her without her needing to speak. That was the part that hurt the most. She had tried to move forward, to let go, to believe in the life waiting for her today, but now that familiarity, that presence, was back in the room, and it felt impossible to ignore. She wanted to hide, to escape somewhere quiet where she could breathe without being watched, without being forced to feel the way her heart thumped so violently in her chest. But there was nowhere to run. The hall seemed suddenly smaller, the walls closing in around her, the crowd pressing in with faces she barely noticed anymore because all she could see was him. He moved closer, and she could feel the weight of his gaze even before she saw it fully. Something in his expression had changed. There was a calmness, a control, a quiet intensity that made her stomach knot with both fear and longing. She remembered how she used to feel when he looked at her, a combination of safety and chaos, of love and confusion. And now, standing there in front of her, he was both stranger and memory, someone she thought she had escaped yet never truly had. Her friends began to approach, smiling, asking if she was ready, if she was excited, and she forced a nod, forcing a smile that felt brittle and false. Inside, a storm raged. Her thoughts collided in impossible ways, pulling her in multiple directions at once. She remembered promises she had made, promises she had broken, and the life she had imagined today. All of it suddenly seemed fragile, almost unreal. She could hear his voice, low and steady, cutting through the soft hum of conversation around her. It wasn't loud, but it carried, slipping into the space between her thoughts and making her heart skip in ways she couldn't explain. She wanted to turn away, to tell herself this wasn't real, that he had no right to appear here now, yet she couldn't. Something inside her recognized him instantly, and every instinct told her that ignoring him was impossible. The guests continued to gather, unaware of the quiet tension building between them. She felt like she was moving through a dream, one where reality was twisted and nothing made sense. Every laugh, every glance around the room felt magnified, as if time had slowed just to hold her in this unbearable suspense. And then he stopped, just a few steps away, and for a moment, the world shrank until it was only the two of them. She could see the familiar tilt of his head, the way his eyes caught the light, and 1,000 memories assaulted her at once. The words she had rehearsed in her mind for today, the promises she was about to make, they all dissolved into silence. She wanted to speak, to explain, to demand why he had come back into her life now, at this exact moment, but her voice failed her. She could feel tears pricking her eyes, though she refused to let them fall, refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her unravel. Instead, she stood there, trembling slightly, her hands clenching into fists at her sides, trying to anchor herself to the floor beneath her. He took a step closer, and everything in the room seemed to shift. The light felt different, the air heavier, the music softer, as if the world had conspired to make this meeting feel inevitable. She could feel the pull, magnetic and terrifying, drawing her attention to him even as every rational thought screamed to look away. And then he spoke her name, softly, almost reverently, and her heart stuttered. She hadn't realized how much she had wanted to hear it again, how much a part of her had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Every syllable was a knife and a balm all at once, cutting into her resolve while soothing the ache of her memories. She wanted to run, wanted to hide in the safety of what she had planned for today, but her feet remained rooted. Part of her wanted to throw herself at him, to demand answers, to reclaim the part of her heart she had thought lost forever. Another part wanted to step back, to guard herself, to stay safe in the life she had imagined before he appeared. And in that breathless pause, in the stillness between two heartbeats, she realized that nothing would ever be simple again. This encounter had changed everything. Her world had split into what was and what could be, and she wasn't sure she could ever put it back together the same way. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself, but the room around her had faded. The music, the laughter, the guests, all of it seemed distant, unimportant. There was only him, standing there, with eyes that had always known her too well, and she had no idea how she could ever face the moment she had prepared for without being completely undone. She stood frozen, her breath caught somewhere between panic and disbelief, while he just looked at her as if nothing had changed, as if all the years, all the distance, all the silence meant nothing. There was a strange calm in the way he moved, the way he held himself, and it made the storm inside her feel even more chaotic. She could feel every memory, every feeling she had tried to bury, rushing back with a force she could not control. He took another step toward her, slow, deliberate, and she felt like the floor beneath her had tilted. Her hands twitched at her sides, wanting to reach out and touch him, to push him away, to say something, anything, but the words lodged in her throat. She could see the familiar lines of his face, the curve of his lips, the way his eyes seemed to search hers with a knowledge only he possessed. She remembered how once, long ago, those same eyes had promised her everything and nothing all at once. Around them, the guests continued their celebrations, clinking glasses, sharing smiles, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. She felt like they were watching from behind a veil, like the world had split into two, one half filled with normal life and the other swallowed by this impossible confrontation. Her heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears so loudly she could barely hear herself think. She wanted to step back, to retreat into the safety of the life she had imagined for herself today, yet she felt rooted to the spot. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, memories, regrets, and desires, all colliding until she didn't know which way was forward or if she even wanted to move. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but a deeper, more dangerous instinct whispered that she couldn't. Not yet. Not now. He spoke again, quieter this time, almost like a confession meant only for her. She barely recognized the sound of his voice after all these years, but every word was searing, cutting through the walls she had built around herself. It reminded her of nights filled with laughter that ended too soon, of promises whispered in the dark that later turned to silence. She had spent years convincing herself that those moments were gone, that she had moved on, but hearing him now made her question everything. Tears threatened, and she clenched her fists so tightly her nails bit into her palms, grounding herself. She had to remain composed, had to make herself remember that today was supposed to be different, that today was the day she was going to step into a life she had chosen. And yet, looking at him, feeling the weight of every memory and every unresolved feeling, she realized that nothing could prepare her for this moment. He took another step closer, and this time she could feel the heat of his presence. It was like the room had shrunk around them, the noise fading, the light dimming, until all that remained was him and the years that had lingered in between. She remembered the way he had held her hand once, the gentle strength in his touch, and the ache in her chest grew sharper, heavier. Her mind raced. Why was he here now? Had he planned this? Or had fate simply thrown them together at the exact moment she thought she had control over her life? She could feel the pull of the past against the promises of the present, the tug-of-war between desire and reason, and it left her trembling, barely able to stand. He paused, close enough now that she could see the faint scar near his eyebrow, the subtle changes time had left on him, and it was almost unbearable. He looked at her like he had 1,000 things to say, but he was choosing his words carefully, measuring them, holding them back. The intensity of it made her breath hitch, made her wish she could hide and confront him at the same time. She remembered the nights she had cried alone, the times she had whispered his name into the darkness when she thought no one could hear. She remembered the emptiness that followed when he disappeared from her life, leaving only memories she had tried to lock away. And now, standing here, seeing him after all these years, the memories flooded back with a force that made her knees weak. His eyes softened, and she caught a flicker of something she had longed to see for years, a recognition, a remorse, and maybe even hope. She didn't know what she wanted more, to run and protect herself from being hurt again, or to let herself fall into the warmth of a connection she thought she had lost forever. The music swelled, as if the world itself was reflecting the tension between them, notes rising and falling like her racing heart. She could feel the pull of the life she had imagined slipping through her fingers, replaced by something older, something raw and undeniable. She realized she had imagined this day countless times, but never like this, never with him standing here, turning every expectation inside out. Her friends were moving closer now, sensing her distraction, but she barely noticed them. Every step, every glance, every subtle movement from him held her attention completely. It was as if the years that had passed melted away in an instant, leaving only the girl who had loved him and the man who had always held a piece of her heart. And then he spoke again, this time with a quiet intensity that made the room seem to stop. The words were simple, but the weight behind them pressed against her chest, threatening to crush her with their truth. She wanted to respond, to demand an explanation, to scream, to run, to cry, to laugh, all at once. Instead, she found herself standing still, caught between fear and longing, between the life she had planned and the life that seemed to call her back. She could feel the tension in her body, the way her muscles had locked without her noticing. She could feel her heartbeat, rapid and uneven, echoing in her ears. She could feel the tears threatening to spill, the memories pressing against the walls of her mind, and she realized she was not ready to face him, but also knew she could not step away without confronting the truth. The hall continued to buzz with normal life, oblivious to the storm that raged between them. She could feel the distance between reality and desire shrinking with every second, every glance, every unspoken word. The choice she thought she had made this morning, the decision to say yes, now seemed fragile, almost meaningless in the face of what was happening here, in this moment, with him standing in front of her, alive in her world again. And she knew, with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that nothing from this moment forward would be simple, that every heartbeat, every breath, every decision would be colored by what was unfolding right now. She felt a shiver run down her spine, a mix of fear, anticipation, and something dangerously sweet, as the realization hit her fully. Her life was about to change, and she had no idea whether it would be for the better or the worst. She felt a strange pull in her chest, an ache that was almost unbearable, yet she couldn't look away. Every inch of him seemed alive with memory, every gesture, every glance a reminder of what had once been, and of what she had tried desperately to forget. The room around her blurred, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the soft hum of music, all of it faded into a distant echo. There was only him and the weight of every unspoken word between them. He took a slow step closer, and she felt the air change, thickening around them, pressing against her skin in a way that made it hard to breathe. She remembered the nights they had spent talking under the stars, sharing dreams and secrets that no one else would ever understand. She remembered how safe she had felt with him, how the world seemed smaller and lighter when he was near. And now, standing here, with the memory and the present colliding, it felt like her heart could burst from the pressure. Her mind was spinning, a whirlwind of emotions she didn't know how to control. She wanted to run, to flee into the life she had imagined, to step into the certainty she had built around herself. But every instinct that told her to leave was countered by a deeper, more dangerous instinct pulling her forward. She couldn't ignore him, not now, not after all this time. He spoke her name again, softly, deliberately, and it struck her like a bell tolling in an empty hall. It was simple, yet it carried the weight of everything unsaid, everything unresolved. She felt a shiver run down her spine, her hands trembling at her sides. She had rehearsed what she would say if she ever saw him again, but now that the moment was here, all her words dissolved into silence. He reached out, just enough for her to see the motion, and she flinched instinctively, her mind screaming at her to pull away. But even as her body recoiled, her heart betrayed her, aching with a longing she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She remembered the warmth of his touch, the comfort she had felt when he held her, the way he had always known her in ways no one else could. And it terrified her, because she wasn't sure she could resist it now. The music swelled around them, soft strings filling the space like a tide that rose and fell with her heartbeat. She felt trapped between what she wanted and what she knew she should do, between the life she had planned and the life that seemed to call her back. Every guest in the room seemed irrelevant, every laugh, every smile a background to the storm that raged in her chest. Her thoughts drifted back to the day he had left. She remembered the confusion, the heartbreak, the nights spent crying silently when she thought no one could see. She remembered the emptiness that had followed, the questions that had gone unanswered, and the life she had tried to build in his absence. And now, standing here, she realized how fragile all of that had been, how easily the past could sweep back into the present and demand her attention. He moved again, closer this time, and she could feel the warmth radiating from him, the subtle scent she had once known so well. Her breath caught, and she had to force herself to take a steady inhale, to remind herself that she was still standing, still holding on, even if only barely. He was patient, watching her, reading her, and it made her feel both exposed and strangely safe at the same time. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, to confront him for the years of silence and absence, but the words refused to come. All she could do was stand there, trembling, as the weight of everything hung between them. The memories pressed against her, sharp and sweet all at once, and she realized that she had never truly let go, that a part of her had always been waiting for this moment, even if she didn't know it. He finally spoke, a whisper meant only for her ears, and the sound of it made her knees weaken. His voice carried a mix of regret, longing, and something tender she hadn't heard in years. She felt tears rise, hot and unbidden, but she blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. She didn't want anyone to see the vulnerability she had tried to hide for so long. The hall around them seemed to vanish. The guests, the flowers, the candles, the music, all of it melted away until there was only the two of them, standing in a space suspended between past and present. She felt like she was walking a tightrope, balanced between the person she had become and the girl who had loved him, the one who had once believed in a future they might have shared. And then she realized something terrifying. The decision she had prepared to make today, the yes she had rehearsed 1,000 times, no longer felt like hers. It had been replaced by a storm of feelings, a tide of memories and desire that threatened to sweep her away. She could feel the pull of him, the way he made her forget herself and the plans she had made, and it was both thrilling and terrifying. Her chest ached as she looked at him, every line of his face familiar and foreign all at once. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to throw herself into his arms and demand answers, yet she knew she couldn't. She had to hold herself together, to face what had returned to her life with clear eyes, even if her heart betrayed her. And in that moment, as the seconds stretched like hours, she understood that nothing from this moment forward would be simple. Everything she had imagined for today, every expectation, every promise, was suddenly fragile, shifting under the weight of his presence. The world she thought she had controlled was unraveling, thread by thread, and she had no choice but to follow where it led, even if it terrified her. She took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to calm the storm within her, but it was useless. Every fiber of her being was alive with tension, every nerve on fire. The past and the present collided in ways she could not contain, and she knew that when this encounter ended, if it ever did, nothing would ever be the same. And just when she thought she could gather herself, he spoke again, softly, almost too soft to hear, but it reached her heart in a way nothing else could. She wanted to answer, to speak, to bridge the years and the silence, but the words caught in her throat. All she could do was stand there, trembling, caught between fear and longing, knowing that the choices she made in the next moments would shape everything that came after. The room seemed to hold its breath around her as she tried to steady herself. Every part of her ached with the weight of what was happening. She could feel his eyes on her, steady, unwavering, reading her like he had always done. It was impossible to look away, impossible to think clearly, impossible to remember the calm, orderly life she had imagined today. Every heartbeat seemed to echo with a rhythm she hadn't heard in years, pulling her back into memories she had fought to leave behind. She remembered the first time she had truly noticed him, the way his laugh had filled the room, the way his presence could make the world feel lighter and warmer. She remembered the small gestures, the subtle kindnesses, the way he had always seemed to understand her without words. Those memories were sharp and sweet, stabbing through the careful armor she had built around herself. And now, here he was, standing just steps away, bringing all of it back as if it had never been lost. Her hands trembled at her sides, and she clenched them into fists to keep herself steady. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, to ask why he had disappeared from her life, why he had left so many questions dangling in the air for years. But even as her mind screamed, her voice refused to come. She could only feel the tension, the pull between past and present, and the raw ache of longing she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. He moved closer again, and this time there was no hesitation in his steps. She could feel the heat of his presence, the subtle weight of his gaze, and the memories of being near him, of leaning into him, of trusting him completely, came rushing back with a force that made her knees weak. She had to remind herself to breathe, to hold on, but every instinct told her she was about to be swept away, pulled into a tide she wasn't sure she could resist. "Why are you here?" she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft music that floated through the hall. It came out trembling, breaking, carrying the mixture of fear and longing that she could no longer contain. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, and his voice was low, deliberate, full of weight. "Because I never stopped thinking about you." The words landed like stones, heavy and undeniable, and she felt her stomach twist with a combination of anger, hurt, and something she could not name. She wanted to push him away, to reject him, to insist that the past was over and that today belonged to the life she had imagined without him. But the moment she tried to step back, she felt the pull again, the gravitational force of the history they shared. She could feel it tugging at her chest, at her heart, at every part of her that had once belonged to him, even if she had thought it lost. He reached out, hesitated, then let his hand fall slightly, as if testing her boundaries without crossing them. She flinched at the movement, yet something inside her wanted to lean in, to close the distance, to reclaim what had been theirs once. But she was afraid, afraid of the past, afraid of being hurt, afraid of what it meant to let herself feel again after all these years. Her mind raced. How could he be here now, when she had spent so long trying to forget him, trying to build a life where he didn't exist? How could he appear in this moment, when she was supposed to make a choice, when everything was supposed to be clear and certain? The timing felt cruel, impossible, like the universe itself had decided to challenge her heart. He stepped closer again, slow, deliberate, and she could feel the space between them shrinking, the tension coiling tighter and tighter until it was almost unbearable. She could smell the faint scent she had once known so well, a mixture of familiarity and memory that brought both comfort and pain. She wanted to run, but she couldn't. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the words stuck in her throat. And then he smiled, just a little, a small, almost imperceptible movement that made her chest ache. It wasn't a triumphant smile, nor a mocking one. It was gentle, full of something she couldn't quite name, and it pulled at her like a tide she couldn't resist. She wanted to hate him for the power he still held over her, but even as the thought crossed her mind, she realized she couldn't. She didn't want to. The music swelled again, rising and falling like the rhythm of her racing heart. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, but she barely noticed them now. All that mattered was him, the way he had returned to her life, the way he had shattered her plans without a single word. Every memory, every unspoken feeling, every fragment of longing she had buried over the years surged to the surface, threatening to pull her under. He spoke again, softly, almost reverently, and she felt the words in her chest before she heard them. "I never stopped loving you." The simplicity of it, the raw honesty, was almost unbearable. She felt tears rise, hot and unwelcome, but she blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. She couldn't let anyone see how much he still had the power to undo her. Her mind was a battlefield, torn between fear and desire, between the life she had imagined and the one that seemed to call her back with every heartbeat. She wanted to step forward, to embrace him, to reclaim what had been theirs, but she was terrified of what it meant. Could she trust him again? Could she believe in a love that had disappeared for so long, only to return at the worst possible moment? He reached out one more time, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the subtle pull of his presence. And in that instant, everything inside her broke. The careful walls she had built, the plans she had made, the life she had imagined, they all felt fragile, meaningless, compared to the intensity of what was unfolding now. She wanted to run, to hide, to scream, to demand answers, but she couldn't move. She could only stand there, trembling, as the storm between them raged, knowing that her life, her heart, everything she had worked for, was about to change forever. And then she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to step away. She didn't want to ignore the pull, the longing, the memories. She didn't want to deny what she felt, even if it meant risking everything she thought she had built. She was caught, utterly and completely, between the life she had planned and the love she had never truly let go of. The room seemed to fade around them, leaving only the two of them, standing in the weight of the past and the promise of something new, something dangerous, something irresistible. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, heart in her throat, knowing that one step could change everything forever. The hall around her seemed to vanish entirely, the laughter, the music, even the soft clinking of glasses fading into a distant hum. It was as if the world had shrunk until only the two of them existed in a space suspended between past and present. She could feel the heat of his presence, the subtle rhythm of his breathing, the way every movement he made seemed deliberate, magnetic, pulling her closer even as fear clenched her heart. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, to reclaim the part of herself that had been lost to the years of silence, but no words came. Her mind spun with memories, with feelings she thought she had buried long ago. She remembered the first time she had laughed so hard with him that tears ran down her face, the way he had wiped them away with the gentlest touch. She remembered how safe and understood she had felt, how his very presence had been a balm she had never known she would need again. And now, standing here, all of that was alive once more, tangling with the life she had built, the careful plans she had made, and the future she had imagined. She felt torn, every fiber of her being stretched between what she thought she wanted and what she couldn't resist feeling. Her chest ached, a heavy, hot pain that made it hard to breathe, and yet she couldn't pull away. She didn't want to. He took a careful step closer, and she felt the world shift beneath her feet. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it, and she felt both terrified and exhilarated by the sheer intensity of the moment. His gaze never wavered, steady and knowing, and she felt exposed in a way she hadn't felt in years. Every memory, every unspoken word, every longing she had tried to ignore surged forward, threatening to consume her. "I thought I'd lost you forever," he said quietly, his voice low, carrying a weight that made her shiver. The words hit her like a physical blow, sharp and sweet all at once. She had never truly realized how much she had clung to the idea of him, how much space he had always held in her heart, until now. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself, but it was impossible. Her hands trembled, and she pressed them against her chest, as if she could contain the whirlwind inside. She wanted to tell him to go, to leave, to let her live the life she had imagined, but she couldn't. Her body betrayed her, leaning subtly toward him even as her mind screamed to resist. The memories crashed over her like waves. She remembered the night they had stayed up talking until dawn, the way he had held her hand and promised things he couldn't keep, the way she had laughed through tears because she had believed in him so completely. She remembered the pain when he left without warning, the silence that followed, the emptiness she had carried like a secret wound. And now, standing here, feeling him close again, all of that pain mixed with longing in a way that left her breathless. He reached out again, slow, deliberate, and this time she didn't flinch. Her hands hovered uncertainly, caught between the desire to touch and the fear of giving herself completely. The room seemed impossibly quiet, the space between them charged with a tension that was almost unbearable. Every second stretched, heavy with emotion, until she felt like the world had condensed into this singular, heart-stopping moment. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said again, almost a whisper, but it carried all the weight of the years they had lost. She felt tears rise, hot and unwelcome, but she blinked them back fiercely. She didn't want anyone to see her unravel. She didn't want to give him the power to see how completely he had always held her heart. Her mind raced. Could she trust him again? Could she allow herself to feel, to fall into the memories that seemed to wrap around her like a familiar blanket, warm and suffocating all at once? She had imagined this day countless times, the decision to say yes, the life she had planned, but now all of that seemed fragile, almost meaningless in the face of what was happening. He stepped even closer, close enough that she could feel the subtle heat of his presence, the faint scent she had once known so intimately. Every fiber of her being wanted to surrender, to close the distance, to let herself be vulnerable and exposed and alive with the emotions she had buried for so long. And yet fear clenched at her chest, a tight knot of doubt, worry, and self-protection. "I can't lose you again," he said, his voice thick with something she hadn't heard in years, desperation, maybe, but also honesty. She felt the words like a pull on her soul, impossible to resist. She had spent so long imagining herself without him, building a life that didn't include the ache he had left behind, and now she realized how hollow that life had been without him. Her breath hitched, and she closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady the storm inside. She felt memories and longing collide, her mind and heart at war. Every laugh, every whispered promise, every shared secret came rushing back, and she realized she had never truly let go. The walls she had built to protect herself seemed fragile now, crumbling under the weight of this moment. He extended his hand once more, this time closer, and she felt the pull of him in a way that made her chest tighten. She wanted to take it, to feel the warmth of his fingers in hers, to bridge the years of silence and absence, to reclaim what had always belonged to them. And yet she hesitated, torn between fear and longing, between the past she had loved and the life she had imagined. Her mind flashed to the life she had carefully built, to the yes she had rehearsed 1,000 times, and she realized that nothing about it felt real anymore. It was fragile, like a dream that could shatter in a single heartbeat, while the emotions rising now felt undeniable, inescapable, all-consuming. She was caught between two worlds, the one she had planned and the one he represented, and she had no idea which path to choose. The room seemed impossibly silent, even as the guests continued their quiet celebration, oblivious to the storm between them. She could feel time stretching, each heartbeat amplified, each second laden with tension and possibility. She was standing on the edge of everything she had known, every expectation, every carefully crafted decision, and she knew that the next move would change everything forever. And then, slowly, inexorably, she realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. She wanted him. She wanted him in a way that made her chest ache, that made her knees weak, that made her pulse thunder in her ears. Every instinct told her it was reckless, every rational thought warned her of the danger, but her heart and body betrayed her completely. She couldn't deny it. She didn't want to. The moment stretched, heavy and electric, until the world seemed to disappear entirely, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a fragile, heart-stopping space where past, present, and possibility collided. She knew she had a choice to make, and she didn't know if she had the courage to choose, or to resist, the pull of what had always been waiting for her. Her chest heaved, and she felt like she was standing on the edge of everything she had ever known, every plan she had made, every dream she had imagined. The air between them was electric, heavy with years of longing, unspoken words, and the ache of memories that refused to stay buried. She could feel his presence like a force pulling at her very soul, and she realized that nothing she had built for herself could compete with this moment, with the way he made her feel alive and terrified all at once. He looked at her, steady, unwavering, and she saw a flicker in his eyes that mirrored the storm inside her. It was recognition, longing, regret, and hope all at once, and it cut through her defenses in a way that left her trembling. She had spent so long imagining this moment, rehearsing how it would go, preparing herself for certainty, and now that it had arrived, it was chaos, beautiful and unbearable. She wanted to step forward, to close the distance, to let herself fall into the warmth and familiarity she had missed more than she had realized. And yet fear gripped her, a cold, sharp hand around her heart, warning her that opening herself completely could mean being hurt all over again. She felt torn between the life she had planned and the love she had never truly forgotten, between safety and surrender, between reason and desire. I thought I could live without you, she whispered, her voice trembling, fragile, carrying all the weight of the years she had tried to bury. She could feel tears threatening to spill, but she held them back fiercely. She didn't want to let anyone see how completely he still held her heart. He reached out, his hand hovering close but not quite touching hers, and the tension made her chest ache. I never wanted to leave you, he said softly, his voice full of honesty, longing, and something she had missed more than she had known. I thought I had no choice, but I never stopped loving you, not for a second. Her breath hitched, and she felt the world tilt around her. Every memory, every longing, every ache she had carried for years pressed forward, threatening to consume her. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, to curse him for leaving, and yet all she could do was stand there, trembling, caught between fear and desire. He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat of his presence, the pull of him like gravity itself. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it, and she realized that the careful life she had imagined today was meaningless in comparison to this. She wanted him, every part of her did, and the realization both terrified and thrilled her. I've waited for this moment for so long, he said, his voice low, almost reverent, and she felt every word resonate deep inside her. She wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to deny herself, but she couldn't. Not when he was here, standing in front of her, holding all the pieces of her heart that she had thought were lost. Her hands shook, and finally, slowly, almost instinctively, she reached toward him. Their fingers brushed, tentative at first, and she felt a spark that made her knees weak and her chest explode with emotion. Every memory of him, every lost moment, every unspoken word, came flooding back, making it impossible to hold herself back any longer. He closed the distance between them, his hand holding hers gently, firmly, and she felt a warmth and a certainty she hadn't known in years. She wanted to step into him, to let herself feel everything she had suppressed, to surrender to the love that had never truly left her heart. I was so afraid, she whispered, tears slipping now, warm and unstoppable. Afraid you wouldn't come back, afraid I had lost you forever. I'm here, he said, his voice soft but strong, carrying a promise that made her chest ache. And I'm not leaving again. The world around them seemed to dissolve entirely. The music, the guests, the candles, all faded into a blur, leaving only the two of them standing in a space suspended in time. She could feel the tension between past and present finally beginning to ease, replaced by a fragile, breathtaking hope. Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement spoke of love that had survived absence, pain, and fear. She looked into his eyes and saw everything she had been longing for reflected there, remorse, longing, honesty, and an unwavering love that had never truly faded. She felt her defenses crumble completely, and she realized that the life she had imagined without him could never compare to the life they could have together now. Slowly, tentatively, she leaned into him, their foreheads touching, and she felt a release, a peace she hadn't known she needed. The storm inside her calmed, replaced by a warm, quiet certainty. She didn't need to plan, didn't need to rehearse, didn't need to be afraid. She just needed to be here, in this moment, with him. I never stopped, he whispered again, and this time she believed him fully. Not for a day, not for a moment. She smiled through her tears, feeling the tension in her body ease for the first time in years. Neither did I, she admitted, her voice trembling with relief, joy, and longing. I thought I could, but I couldn't. And in that space, suspended between past heartbreak and present hope, they finally allowed themselves to close the distance completely. Their hands intertwined, their hearts synchronized, and the years of longing, absence, and uncertainty melted away. It wasn't just a reunion, it was a reclaiming, a proof that love could survive even the cruelest separations, the harshest tests, and the passage of time. The room slowly returned around them, the music and laughter resuming, but it felt distant, almost irrelevant. She realized she no longer cared what anyone else thought, no longer cared about the careful plans she had made. All that mattered was him, and the love that had endured in silence, patiently waiting for this moment to finally unfold. And as they stood there, holding each other, letting the tears fall freely, she knew one undeniable truth: the past had shaped them, but the present had chosen them, and the future, whatever it held, would be theirs to navigate together. Nothing would ever be simple again, but for the first time in years, she felt ready. Ready to love, ready to forgive, ready to step into a life with him, fully and without reservation. In that moment, she realized that the yes she had almost given earlier didn't matter. She didn't need to say it to anyone else. She only needed to feel it, here and now, in the arms of the man who had always been a part of her heart, waiting patiently for the day they could finally find each other again. And as their foreheads touched, their fingers intertwined, and the warmth of their love enveloped them, the room around them seemed to glow, a quiet celebration of hearts reunited, of pasts reconciled, and of a future that was finally theirs to claim together. Wow, what a journey of love, heartbreak, and rediscovery. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more tales like this. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Tell us your country in the comments and what time it is where you are right now. Your story is part of ours, and we can't wait to hear from you.